It is the 31st of the 10th, 2025. The time is 7 minutes past 8. Happy Halloween, therefore. But more importantly than that, that means that there's a very F1 centric thread. Of course, Cameron, sort your life out, mate. There's a multitude of F1 centric threads at which we need to pull TMM. F-boy, it's going to get techie. We've got to talk about Max Verstappen's manager, talking about the prospects of Max Verstappen, GOAT, staying at Red Bull further down the road than 2026. We've got to talk about Helmut Marko saying about Carlos Sainz and his relationship with Ferrari, that his was a gift to Ferrari, that but for the safety car circumstance. What are you on about, Cameron? But for the cheeky yellow flag, double wave yellow towards the end of the Mexican Grand Prix, that there is no way that Charles Leclerc would have been able to fend off a fire-breathing dragon. We'll talk about George Russell and contract recalibration per Toto, the boy who cried wolf. We'll talk about Autosport, their blog, their podcast. They were talking about Piastri and Lando Norris's chances of repeating for his god-tier performance that we saw at the Mexican Grand Prix. So too, we'll talk about Adrian Newey, his comments on Maximilian Verstappen. But in the first instance, I want to talk about some Scuderia Ferrari. Buckle up, chat. This is going to get techier than techie things. Your boys are about to go scorched earth early, and this on your Friday show. So I don't want to bury the lead. I don't want to go too hard too soon. As far as technical stuff on Scuderia Ferrari, Auto Racer are now saying that they fixed the sensitivity as far as their rear suspension. I don't believe it, chap. Again, they've become quicker, right? What the car struggled with season to date, lack of rigidity as far as the rear. They can't ride curbs. They don't have the stability. Lewis Hamilton doesn't have the confidence in the car to push it through the medium to high speed stuff. However, Auto Racers are now saying that the new rear suspension has less sensitivity than the old suspension in cornering phases. Listen, Scuderia Ferrari, this feels like propaganda. You've got a gazillion problems for which you need to solve, not least of which, by the way, is Sir Lewis Hamilton. Now, ESPN have published an article on the 28th of October, in it saying that Ollie Behrman has made a statement at the Mexican Grand Prix that he will be the next Scuderia Ferrari driver as and when one of Charles or Sir Lewis or both choose to leave the team. That he was so good over the course of the Mexican Grand Prix that it's now beyond reasonable doubt. Just give him the job. Therefore, Scuderia Ferrari, he's always been a Ferrari Junior driver, hasn't he? So then why not just give him the role, especially when you come to find out that there are more than one Scuderia Ferrari personnel now speaking about Sir Lewis Hamilton, expressing their discontent at the fact that Sir Lewis hasn't yet lived up to his in excess of $70 million billing. The ESPN article writes that senior sources, senior insiders in the F1 paddock are now expressing discontent, and they want Lewis Hamilton to leave after next year. Lest we forget, he has a 2+1. Much like George has a 1+1, this is a multi-year contract of sorts that Lewis has in the palm of his hand. Depending upon performance, he can stay there 3 years, potentially. The problem is this though, chat. Lewis Hamilton currently sits 50 points adrift of Charles Leclerc. Now, is he catching? Of course he is. Is the gap in terms of absolute time in qualifying, is it getting closer between Lewis and Charles as Lewis beds his way, plays his way into the Ferrari crease? Absolutely. You bet your bottom dollar is. But is it too little, too late? This is the non-rhetorical question for which Lewis will need to answer. And you know what? I've got to go scorched earth here because I've been listening to some Lewis Hamilton Cult LH podcast. You know what the problem for me is this, and excuse me, forgive me, Lord, for I know not what I do, but I've got to get a bit excitable here because this is my subject matter expertise. Here's the problem. Lewis doesn't ask for all this defect. Lewis is a big man, soon to be 41 years old in February. He can look after himself. He doesn't need anybody defending him or going to bat for him at the altar of Abu Dhabi 21. Leave him alone. He's asked that nobody goes and protests and signs all these bloody petitions, and nobody needs to get a tiki torch and protest because Lewis Hamilton isn't happy. Because he is happy. Of course he nearly retired at the end of 2021. Of course he did. But he decided he was going to come back and draw a line under the circumstance and move on with his life. It is a shame, therefore, that so many of Colt LH cannot move on. And let me distinguish here, because it's really, really important. I want to be super precise with my language before I go full scorched earth. There has always been a line delineating fans of Sir Lewis Hamilton and Colt LH. Fans of Sir Lewis will talk like this, bearing in mind the season that the 7-time champ has had. That, yeah, it hasn't been the best season, but what did you expect? It was Charles Leclerc. He's in the prime of his career, just turned 28, point to point the quickest. I hope Lewis can take a couple of races, maybe get a couple of podiums, but I'm realistic. I'm investing all of my Lewis Hamilton eggs in the 2026 rhetorical basket, and that makes sense, chat. That's hopeful. That is but it's not based in unreason. That's what Sir Lewis Hamilton fans will say. Yeah, I'm not too happy with 2021, but what am I going to do about it? I'm not going to overtype Lewis and his emotion, his demands. He said, let's full stop, new paragraph, move on with our lives, lest we forget that time in life is a finite resource. That's how Sir Lewis Hamilton fans will talk. Colt LH though, this is what they'll say, chat. And I just at the level of Abbott of unreason is absolutely ridiculous. Why isn't George Russell wiping Lewis Hamilton's bottom for him? Why isn't Charles Leclerc wiping his bottom? How very dare Charles be a racing driver and try and maximise for his utility and his points in 2026? Why don't they mollycoddle up to Sir Lewis and spoon him like I want to? That's what these lot are saying. You cannot even believe it. Honestly, genuinely, I think they bring shame on the Lewis Hamilton fan. Now, it's just the level of ridiculousness is absolute. It's too much. It's too much. Scourge of the F1 sport. I just can't. It's nonsense. And Lewis Hamilton wouldn't like to hear that if he could, if he even listens to the bloody media. Oh, what Charles Leclerc needs to do, he needs to cede to Lewis Hamilton and have some respect, bend the knee. Do you know what I mean? Kiss his toes, just as George Russell should. Mate, George Russell and Charles Leclerc are fire-breathing dragons of F1 drivers. They want to destroy all before them. They don't just want to win, they want to see their enemies fall. Why? Because that's what F1 drivers do. It's a shame, and I don't want to be discerning and get on my high moralistic F1 horse. I don't want to do that today, but by dint of Drive to Survive, I understand that there are a gazillion Colt LH Lewis Hamilton evangelists that have only ever seen Lewis Hamilton win. I understand. They only came into the sport at the very earliest in 2015-16 when Lewis started winning in perpetuity. And I get it, it's difficult, but F1 just is not that easy, nor is it that simple. It is Fermat's last theory. This is not counting. And that's where it gets techie. But it burns me to hear this nonsense that you got to factor. What do you want Charles Leclerc to do? I heard somebody say that I thought Charles Leclerc was better. Then it's better than what? Better than 50 points down the road from it. Listen, and you know what the worst thing is? I listen. You will hear some disparaging things come out of my mouth as far as Charles Leclerc. You will hear it from time to time. Modern day journal lazy. Is he perfect as a driver? Absolutely not. Does he fulfill? He's not insubstantial, as of yet unfulfilled potential at each and every single turn. Absolutely not. He's Charles Leclerc, modern day journal lazy, but he's 50 points down the road from Sir Lewis Hamilton. Do you mean you thought Charles was better than that? What are you talking? Honestly, it's insane. The level of buffoonery and Abbott of unreason is absolutely ridiculous. Let me tell you this, chat. This is important for me to state this. On this channel, we will never bury our head in the sand. We will never avert our gaze away from the light of truth. We will never sacrifice objectivity at the altar of partisanship or any other cognitive dissonance worthy of the money. I cannot, no, I will not do it. The siren sound of unreason grows louder by the day in the space. And I don't know whether it's willful negligence or ignorance. I don't know. I can't discern. My mind isn't sharp enough. I don't know whether this is confirmation bias manifest, but it's not good enough. Oh, Charles Leclerc needs to bend the knee. Sir Lewis Hamilton, he should have given the position back. Give what position back? You think Lewis in his pomp is giving any position back to anyone? To anyone? Why would he do it? He's an F1 driver. What do we do? You know what, chat? I cannot. Here's hoping that Sir Lewis, I want the best for Sir Lewis. And the best for Sir Lewis is not that level of Abbott of reasoning. It is not now, not ever. He wouldn't want for people to go and march in the streets because of 2021 Abu Dhabi. He's told you that much, but you don't care about that. You only care about yourself. That and therein lies the problem. I cannot with Colt LH. I'm done. Lewis Hamilton fans, obviously, like, this is the different thing, but it's important that we delineate at this point and make the distinction, because on one side of that fence there is truth, there is hope, yet and still, but there isn't confirmation bias necessarily. On the other side, it is all of the aforementioned. It is cognitive bias, it is confirmation bias, it is cognitive dissonance central, and I can't be there, chat. I just can't. Sympathy is needed. To lose to a hero, says TMM, is akin to going through the stages of grief, denial, anger, bargaining, depression and acceptance. TMM, but the problem is this chap, like, look, here's what I've always said about Sir Lewis as far as his performance. The reason why I'm so disappointed in the 50-point tally, the delta between him and Charles Leclerc, not that I didn't expect it, but because I remember Sir Lewis in his proper force of nature settings 2007, 2008. It was different. It was something different to anything that I'd ever seen. The joke is, I do not understand why Max and Lewis fans don't get along, because young Sir Lewis reminds me a lot as a driver of young Maximilian Verstappen. I just think it makes no sense. I just cannot. It's too much at this stage. And I think it's nonsense. I think it's ridiculous, and I won't engage it meaningfully. But maybe Scuderia Ferrari need to sort out their car first, and then Lewis Hamilton's final gambit 2026. Let's see how that goes. Because if that doesn't yield fruit, then Houston, we genuinely have a problem. Because senior officials per ESPN are saying that potentially Scuderia Ferrari will sack off the one that they call Sir Lewis, Carl, Davidson, Hamilton. At what point, you let me know, chap, at what point do you call time on the Lewis Hamilton trade if you're John Elkann or you are Frederick Vasseur? How long can you continue to be overweight, only invested in $70 million a year, Sir Lewis Hamilton, a 42-year-old, but one, by the way, when Ollie Behrman, he starts to do bloody magic tricks with the car, when Antonelli's there waiting in the wings, when Arvid Lindblad, everybody else is getting promoted. I just don't get it. It's chaos. Mike says, call LH on F1 fans, and that's why I said, you know what, Michael, let me put Mama Cameron, and the only reference I have 9 times out of 10 is Mama Cameron. Can you be an F1 fan if when Lewis Hamilton retires, you will never watch another F1 race? Non-rhetorical question. I don't think those two things exist in the same space. I will be honest, because if you're an F1 fan first, then when Lewis comes and goes, when Max comes and goes, you will still be dialed into F1. This isn't for me to prejudice, to disparage the lens, the subjective lens through which anybody ingests their F1. I can't, no, I won't do that. But this is an open, honest question. If you're an F1 fan first, then you'll be here long after Sir Lewis. Yeah, it'll be a sad day in the F1 space once Sir Lewis Hamilton retires. Of course it will. Like, I don't think there's been a mainstream superstar in Formula One before Sir Lewis, as far as the extent, the ground that he's covered. Jimmy Kimmel, bloody Saturday Night, like all these shows. That's how big Sir Lewis Hamilton's social media footprint is. It's unprecedented settings, unprecedented time. Lando Norris is living in the shadow as far as his commercial footprint and its size of Sir Lewis Hamilton. And I mean that in earnest. That's not a knock on Lando. We'll come to that in a couple of minutes. But I mean, when Lewis Hamilton leaves, what, you think I'm going to stop watching F1? Well, if you can say that, then were you ever really an F1 fan? I'm not saying this disparagingly at all. This is an honest question. You guys let me know in the chat. I don't think so either. TMM, there is still marketing advantage which is needed. Mate, TMM, I tell you what, John Elkann spoke about this, and they said about it at the start of the season, didn't they? Said, oh, this isn't a marketing exercise, that there is no better way to market a firm that needs all of the marketing upside that it can get at the moment in Scuderia Ferrari than to win. It is that simple. It is no more complicated than that. Win and win well. If you are losing, don't lose to the extent that Scuderia Ferrari have been. And Shakespearean false seeming, right? Make sure it looks as if everything or all is well on the Western front, and they haven't been doing that. You've heard the communication. You've heard the rumour about John Elkann wants Christian Horner, that they only extended the contract of Frederick Vasseur because at the time they had no other option. That, ladies and gentlemen, doesn't sound like all is quiet on the Scuderia Ferrari Western front. Ferrari will have more than Lewis to worry about next year if next year's car is codenamed Lyco. Oh, the humanity. Lyco 2026, says OG Zilla. They will have to worry about keeping Charles in that seat for 2027. Go on then, OG Zilla. I'll see you that and raise you this. Which one is the more concerning? If you are broadening your time, and you know what, this history, F1 history doesn't repeat, but sometimes it does rhyme. It does rhyme. I remember when Toto and Lewis were having a conversation around a table with Martin Brundle, and they spoke about their timelines. Lewis Hamilton said, I'm getting towards the dying embers of my career here. I might have 2 or 3 or 4 years left maximum. So what he can't do, he can't focus on the medium to long term. He can't work on a time horizon that's 5 to 10 years. He just cannot. Because Father Time is undefeated, undisputed, pound for pound, has never ever lost the round, nor will it ever. So Lewis Hamilton needs to get something done now. He's here for a good time at the ripe old age, soon to be 41, not a long time, and that's fundamental. Toto sat opposite Lewis Hamilton, said, you know, we're working from different horizons now. I'm a shareholder. I run the business. I'm not a businessman. I'm a business man. Is Toto Wolff talking now, alluding to this fact. He therefore is working to a 5 to 10 year time horizon as the owner of the business. Now, Lewis Hamilton is working even more short term than that. This conversation happened a couple of years ago. Lewis saying that he was going to sign on for Mercedes yet again. Now, that short term horizon is even shorter now because Lewis has got maybe 2 years, 3 years at best. Especially now that ESPN, Nate Saunders, again, all F1 journalists are created equally, but some are created more equal than others, is saying that Paddock insiders are saying that potentially Scuderia Ferrari will not extend Sir Lewis Hamilton's contract past the end of next year. Oh, the humanity. Chaos. And some will say, how can you blame them? Can you imagine Ollie Behrman still putting in these performances this time next year? What, you're going to keep him there in a bloody... No. You're going to promote him? You're going to put him in you're going to be keen, want to put him in that Ferrari to expedite for his learning curve as soon as possible. It's going to get techier than techie things, but this bloody cult LH, I'm through. I have no more. This is it's done. They're bringing the fandom into this. Not Sir Lewis Hamilton fans. Of course, I'm talking to cult LH. Charles Leclerc should have done this, that, and the other. What are they talking? Honestly. Absolutely ridiculous. Oh, and by the way, I've got to talk about George Russell's contract because Toto's come out and said something else. He said that because George's contract, his previous one, was signed as a junior driver, one of the things that took long to sort between this contract signing and last were bits and bobs, nuances, details, T's and C's. Here's what he said specifically. That the driver who has shown what he's able to do in George Russell, King George of Kings Lynn, Norfolk, that you just need to readjust for the contract, that the status that he is now as versus what he was, that you just need to recalibrate certain terms. I think Toto, as far as King George's contract, is talking about the following: the extent of his sponsorship duties, because George next year, especially if Mercedes design him a market leading car, will only want to do one thing: win races and therefore championships. You see who George Russell is when he talks about Max Verstappen, when he competes with Max Verstappen on track. There is no before or after as far as George is concerned when it comes to F1. Toto says, this is what we did as far as George's contract, and that's all done now. Well, Toto, to be fair to you, mate, you weren't saying that a couple of weeks ago when you were flirting. The exact thing that you said you were not going to do, which was flirt outside of the relationship at, I don't know, a Maximilian Verstappen forcing to a 5-time champion. That's exactly what you were doing, Toto. How very there's a word for people that do that. Say they're not going to do something and then do it. I think it begins with hippo and ends in crit. Dare I call Toto the boy who cried wolf? Maybe that's unfair of me, maybe. But bet your bottom dollar that this time next year, when Max Verstappen, if indeed he doesn't have himself a market-leading RB22, that this conversation will rear its ugly head again. Bet your bottom dollar that Toto's keen to make amends for the mistakes of Christmas past, the contractual ones. Again, if you have the opportunity to sign the next generational driver, then you take it, circumstances notwithstanding. Toto didn't do it then, but you bet your bottom dollar he won't miss again. He will try and make that happen this time next year. That's why you hear all the conversation about the negotiations. Miami Grand Prix last year, summer break last year, 2 of them on the yacht this year. Toto is courting. He's doing exactly what he said that he wouldn't do, which is to flirt outside of the King George and Antonelli relationship, because for the avoidance of doubt, he would drop kick in the chest George Russell. As brilliant as that dude has been, Toto would happily, with impunity, drop kick George in the chest if it meant getting a whiff of the signature of one Maximilian Verstappen. And stating, don't believe me, well, in 12 months' time, we will revisit, we will be forced to revisit this conversation. Oh, and by the way, speaking of which, Maximilian Verstappen's manager, Raymond Vermeulen, has come out and he's had some things to say, hasn't he? He's posturing. They're teeing this up nicely. He said that, listen, the loyalty will only get us so far, that Max will stay for next year, but he will need more than that. This is a family. Max has said on a gazillion occasions that he wants to stay and complete his F1 career with Red Bull Racing. Tick. Love it. That's proper. But he sounds a little bit like Charles Leclerc, if, of course, we didn't know that Max Verstappen wasn't thinking something else in the background. Max Verstappen wants to win races, chat, only. That's all that he wants to do. He's here. He exists on this earth to do exactly that. Nothing more, nothing less. And to do that, you need yourself a very fast car, market leading potentially. Word on the F1 curb is that Mercedes will have that in 2026 and potentially 27 and 28 shortly thereafter. So where do you think Max is going to go? You tell me, chat. Where do you think Max will want to go if Mercedes deliver on their market-leading power unit, just as they did in 2014, split-turbo hybrid settings? If Petronas give them the market-leading sustainable fuel that everybody's saying that they're going to get, where do you think Max Verstappen's going to go? Even if George Russell is over there, it's a really important next step for Max Verstappen, lest we forget that he'll want to differentiate himself from all of the other 4-time championship muggles. He'll want to be on Fangio's level at 5, and shortly thereafter he'll want to be on Michael's level and Lewis's level at 7, and then shortly thereafter he'll be looking to differentiate himself from even the 7-time champions and win 8 and 9 and 10. That's who Max Verstappen is. What if the budget cap included driver salary? Bloody Nora Rich. I mean, we're playing hypothetical games. It'd be techie. It's the most balanced life. We're trying Alimentado. We are trying. Oh, and by the way, Dr. Helmut Marko spoke about Carlos Sainz. He was like, listen, that stuff that went on towards the end of the Grand Prix, even though ostensibly to most onlookers, it looked like Carlos Sainz did his best, made best efforts to extricate himself from the circumstance by going right down the runoff area to where, to most, it looked like there was no need for a double waved yellows. Carlos Sainz was well away. I know there was smoke, but he was clear. It's one of the slowest turns on the track where Carlos went off, and he wasn't exposed. There was no danger as near as makes no difference. So what are we doing here? There's a race to be had. We waited 68 laps to see Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen duke it out like they did back in the day at Silverstone. And you mean to tell me that the FIA are going to yet again seize competitive defeats from the jaws of victory? Why? What are we doing, FIA? This makes absolutely no sense. And Dr. Helmut Marko concurs, saying that Carlos Sainz gave a late leaving gift to Scuderia Ferrari, rescuing Charles Leclerc from the jaws of defeat, because all and sundry, all aficionados are now saying that Max Verstappen would have nailed him. You bet your bottom dollar Max Verstappen would have nailed him. Did he look like he was slowing down to you? A metronomic performance from Max in the dying embers of that Grand Prix. As near as makes no difference, within 0.2 every single lap for 37 laps on those there soft compound tyres. Bet your bottom dollar Max in that mood wasn't, and even Charles Leclerc said it, eh? Charles Leclerc was like, you know what? It's kind of happy for the bloody safety car at the end. Like, do you know what I mean? I was happy because I think Max would have got me. Yeah, you bet your bottom dollar. No kidding, Sherlock. Max would have got you in that mood. Did you hear GP over the bloody radio? It was like, mate, GP doesn't even offer praise that much. This time, though, he's like, blimey, Max, that was ever so slightly chaotic. Not a bad second stint. Oh, and by the way, to that point, have you heard about the chaos between Liam Lawson? Initially, the Mexican Federation, the guys and girls over there at the Mexican Grand Prix, were trying to blame Liam Lawson for what? Why? For not steering away from the stewards. The stewards, ladies and gentlemen, shouldn't be on track when it is live. Full stop, new paragraph. There's nothing more to say or see here. I know there is agency and people want to protect themselves and there's money involved. I get it. But you're not going to lie to me. You can't tell me the sky is red when I know for a fact it is blue. Don't have stewards out on the bloody track when it's live. You guys know how this has ended up before. Stewards and drivers have died before through things like this. So what are we doing here, FIA? Be better. You can be inconsistent around transponders and full starts if you want. But this sort of thing costs people lives. What are we doing here? Nobody wants to see this stuff. The ultimate bottom line, the worst case scenario eventuality. Nobody wants to see that on bloody TV. Our kids are watching. FIA, do better. We expect better. It's $1 billion sport. 24 billion is how much F1 is worth now on the Nasdaq as far as its market capitalization. You're telling me you can't afford some full-time stewards that travel the world? Throw some money at the problem and stop being silly. It's nonsense. I've had enough now. FIA always have me going scorched earth and raising my blood pressure for no reasons. Liam Lawson was to blame. What are they talking about, Mexican Federation? Now, the FIA have absolved blame from Liam Lawson. As well they might, but bloody what the Federation do? Like, it's not, honestly, chat, I cannot do it. Happy Halloween to all of those viewers celebrating with your young ones. Do you know what I mean? And then we need to talk about this Felipe Massa, because this gets techier than techie things. Chat, very techie. In 2008, Lewis Hamilton won his first championship. Felipe Massa was very, very close. He's burned him ever since. When he crossed the line, he thought he nailed it. Is that Glock? James Allen said. And Glock was the one that Lewis Hamilton needed to pass to put himself back in world championship contention in first place. That happened in Brazil of 2008. And Felipe Massa's never forgiven them for that. Not for Brazil, but for Singapore that year. That year, it was Renault, it was Alonso, and it was Piquet Jr. Piquet Jr., after a cheeky early pit stop by Fernando Alonso, was told to yeet it into the barrier, therefore setting up a very important financial reward by dint of Fernando Alonso's only win that season. Piquet, though, Crashgate. You can't do that, chat. Tell him to crash into the wall to set up a victory. This makes no sense. Felipe Massa ever since then has been like, you know what, he's talked about it and now he's doing it. He's taking all and sundry, everybody who knew about that thing, to court. Now, there's a thing, of course, where you can't, in 2000, how long was the go to 2008? 18 years. You can't take somebody to court 18 years after the fact. It's too late. There's a precedent, I can't even remember what it's called, some litigation term, 6 years normally, right? But Felipe Massa's saying it was only in 2023 when he heard Bernie Ecclestone give the interview where he confessed that he knew all about Crashgate. He knew all about Fabio Briatore and Alonso's involvement and Piquet Jr.'s involvement, that Bernie Ecclestone gave that interview in 2023, and Felipe Massa is claiming loss of earnings for the course of that championship. Some say was perverted. $80 million T-Race. It's techie. It is techie. It's about the money more than the WDC. I think it's more about, you know what, Miami, you raised the point. I think it is about the money. And I think it's about attention. I know Felipe Massa never struck me as the attention-seeking type, but bloody Nora, like, how can it not be? Attention and money. T-Racer says he's a clown. I don't think he's a clown. I think the way that it's worked for Felipe Massa, I think his career came to an untimely end. You remember that bolt struck up off the tarmac and hit him. It could have unalived him even. It was an untimely end to his career, and everyone will always remember him for 2008. That year, he conducted himself in an almost uncanny sportsmanship. He was. You remember seeing him on the podium. He won that race, of course, but he lost the championship. Tears coming out. He was very sportsmanlike. He was a brilliant representation for the sport at the time. This, however, chat. This, I don't think. He will of course lose that case. Loss of earnings, 80 million. I don't think that's on the money, Felipe Massa. I think that's a gazillion miles away from where you want to be necessarily, but I digress. Oh, and by the way, the guys and girls over at the race have spoken about the context of the championship going into the final four Grand Prix, and here it is. Lando Norris is currently a hot favourite. Odds on, if you run the next four races, the rest of the championship, therefore, 100 times, they say that Lando Norris will win the championship 55 of those times. Oscar Piastri, 27 of those times. Maximilian Verstappen, only 20%. Now, look, gap in the championship is 1 point. I think, firstly, they've undercut Oscar Piastri's odds. I will say that up front. 27%. That is recency bias manifest. And then 55% for Lando Norris. I think that's a bit techie. Now, of course, Lando Norris is in the resurgence. He looked brilliant around the Mexican Grand Prix. But the problem for Lando Norris isn't doing it once on any given Sunday. The problem is consistency. So let's broaden out the timeline, time horizon ever so slightly. Over the past 5 Grand Prix, he's destroyed Oscar Piastri all but once, almost 4 consecutive back-to-back. But again, 4 versus 8 is the problem. This is one of consistency as far as Lando Norris is concerned. And the guys and girls over at the race concur. They bear this point out probably better and more succinctly than I ever could. Roll the clip.
Like from the car and your situation within it to get the most out of yourself. But when you get that, you're unstoppable. And it could just be that Norris found a very particular groove in Mexico. I don't think anyone was beating him. You know, even if Piastri had a cleaner weekend or if he redid the weekend or Verstappen was in the other car, it could just be one of those absolutely mighty Norris weekends, which he can't have 24 times a season. So his kind of pattern, if there is one, is that there'll be points in the season where he's absolutely untouchable, but then a few points where actually he's quite average. Whereas Piastri seems like the kind of driver who's a bit more kind of consistently on one level, but you don't get quite the same peaks of performance.
No kidding, Sherlock. And what do you mean seems? Lando Norris is peakier than Oscar Piastri, but Oscar Piastri over a long enough timeline, if past his prologue, will deliver you yield more consistent fruit. And therein lies the problem with those odds. 20-something% of the time, 27% of the time for Oscar, 55 for Lando. Can you say recency bias? Ed Straw puts a bookend on this point about Lando Norris, how brilliant he was at the Mexican Grand Prix. You wouldn't necessarily expect this form to continue over the ensuing 4 races. Roll the clip.
Even when he's at his best.
Yeah, it's a good point. A few times this season when Norris has had a mighty weekend, we thought, oh, right, will he kick on? And then he doesn't. So
yeah, exactly,
that's the other question. So, yeah.
He doesn't. No, he can't. And therein lies the issue. As brilliant as Lando Norris is, and I don't want to go disparaging on Dustin from Stranger Things. It's not that time because he was brilliant over the course of the Mexican Grand Prix. Wasn't he, Javier? Put Max in that red car with the yellow badge and the black prancing horse atop. And Max will 100% kill off Shaw because he will adapt to the car. Max is the quickest, most complete driver. Be blessed, Javier. You're a legend, sir. Javier Gutierrez. Listen, I tell you what. We'll get to the Maximilian Verstappen comparisons in a minute, because the legend that is the last airbender, Adrian Newey, speaks to it more succinctly than I ever could. Here's the thing, though, about Oscar Piastri versus Lando Norris. Mark Hughes writes a brilliant article, and he talks about this isn't coincidence, nor is it sabotage necessarily, says Mark Hughes. Favoritism, okay, maybe there's mens rea, but actus reus is something very different. Are you meaning to tell me that Zak Brown is putting his finger on the scale? The one most egregious instance season to date as far as favouritism that I cannot explain is this: sack off the inversion at the Italian Grand Prix, 5.9 seconds slow pit stop from Lando Norris. He's gone and got DNF since, right? Crashed into Oscar Piastri at the Canadian Grand Prix. I don't think those are proof positive necessarily of any sort of favouritism by dint of Zak Brown. Here's what still perturbs me, though, and would still perturb me if my name were Oscar Piastri. What you don't do, if there were two protagonists in the Drivers' Championship, both racing for McLaren, what you don't do if you are Zak Brown and Andrea Stella is in qualifying at the Italian Grand Prix when Lando Norris had made a mistake of his own making, by the way. What you don't do is come over the radio to Oscar Piastri and ask him to take Lando Norris, to tow him to ensure he gets through to Q3. Now, all of the other stuff, I don't care. The Singapore love kiss, the back, all of that stuff, I feel fades to black. Even Australia calling it off when it was dry and then wet. Like, I get all that level of risk managing and that level of interference, whatever. Pep Guardiola of F1, Andrea Stella, has that in his locker. He wants to interfere. He wants to manage everything, every facet of the race, like the micromanager that he is. And I understand it. I'm not for it, but I get it. I get it. What I don't get, nor will I ever get, is them having the temerity to come over the radio when it looked like that it was only the two of them fighting for a championship and order Oscar Piastri to sabotage himself by towing Lando Norris into Q3. No chance. No chance. If ever you wanted an argument that there were favouritism, that potentially Zak Brown was Mr. Actus Reus and not just mens rea, then I would argue that the Italian Grand Prix qualifying tow Lando into Q2 instruction was it. That, ladies and gentlemen, is too chaotic. We'll talk about Lando very quickly because a lot's been made of his performances of late as versus his mental fortitude. Remember, about 3 months ago, we were all saying, well, Lando just doesn't have it. He doesn't have the mental fortitude. And then they adjusted for his suspension, dialed out some of the understeers, so typical of the MCL 3.9, and dialed up the extent to which Lando could get feedback through the steering wheel. Gave him everything he needed. They asked Oscar, do you want this upgrade? He said, it's not an upgrade, mate. Not an upgrade. If it's not bringing performance to the car, if you're going to make it just easier to drive, then I don't need it. Fast forward over the last couple of Grand Prix where it's low grip circumstance, where per Mark Hughes, Lando Norris's overlappy style as far as the throttle and the brake and the steering are coming into play. I mean, if your goal, if the modus operandi around low grip circuits is to make sure you heat up the front sufficiently to make sure they're grippy enough coming to turn one without destroying the rears, the Lando Norris's style is always going to suit that better. He's always going to be quicker. Mark Hughes alludes to this. He says going into turn one, Lando Norris gained all of his time. Through the ensuing turns all up until the final one, Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri were nose for nose, as quick as each other, as near as makes no difference. But going through the final turn, where it's important that you've looked after your rears by dint of an overlappy driving style, potentially, Lando again has the time. So all of the time in qualifying, says Mark Hughes, between Lando and Oscar was lost by Oscar going through turn one and the final turn at Mexico. And again, this is all, says Mark Hughes, by dint of the overlappy driving style that Lando has, as versus Oscar's binary style accelerator, off the accelerator, on the brake 100%, off the brake, on the accelerator, just like Ayrton Senna used to say was the most efficient way. No, dynamite, I don't disagree, mate. We could do with a bit of rain as Max Verstappen fans, but it's not the most unlikely scenario. There's a lot of rain in that part of the world at the moment, See, you're a legend. TWM says, yes, Mercedes wanted Schumacher to win badly, especially considering that he had good management skills with both sides of the back. But he was at time, Father Time is undefeated, undisputed, eh? TWM. OJP wished he took that upgrade. I tell you what, OJP will wish that he did. He'll wish he took that upgrade. He'll wish that he wasn't so bloody nice. Do you know what I mean? Invert. I'm not inverting. No. I'm racing for a championship here. The delta is 1 point. Lived for this all my life. Stop with the nonsense and the United Colours of Benetton ethos. This isn't participation Olympics. Everybody doesn't get a medal just for coming. All this nonsense McLaren are talking about. Oh, do you mind, Oscar, if Lando wins? That we said, go away. Not talking to me about this. I'm not prepared to indulge it. All the while, it could get techier than techie things as a looming big shark in Maximilian Verstappen won't hesitate to steal their lunch money if they dilly-dally for too much longer. Here's what you need to know, because and by the way, Adrian Newey gave an interview to friend of the channel, James Allen. Race for Dementia was on over the course of the week, and it's a brilliant course. Adrian Newey was there, and he gave an interview to the legend that is James Allen, speaking about drivers that he's worked with, specifically which one of them are the best. Here's Adrian Newey. Roll the clip.
Ayrton, unfortunately, was only a very short relationship. I mean, what mightily impressed me, we were talking about drivers having interest outside what they are always doing. So Ayrton, when I was at Williams, late 93, and so he came to the factory for the first time, and I was given the task by the privilege of showing by Frank and Patrick of showing Ayrton around the factory. So we got to the wind tunnel, and straight away he was down on his hands and knees, looking at the rear suspension, spotted that was a bit different to anything that had been done before, asking all about it. Why had we done this? Why had we done that? What was the purpose of it, etc. You know, I needed to be on my toes to answer his questions. So I think Ayrton, without doubt, was outstanding. Max now, I think, is absolutely outstanding as well. He's not had the easiest upbringing. I don't think that's a secret, but his maturity is amazing. His ability to handle pressure, soak up pressure, he seems to have this ability where whatever's going on in his life, when he puts that helmet on and gets in the car, all the noise is switched off and he can just go out and race, which is mightily impressive in a sportsman, I think.
A fascinating.
No kidding, Sherlock. I will link the full interview and or pod in the description. Techier than techie things. That's why I think in 2025 was my supposition, my principal supposition. So many people are drawn to Max Verstappen like a moth to a flame. Oh, stop with your D1 glazing, they will say, Cameron. Why don't you give it a rest? It's not me saying this. I defer to the infinitely more wise than I, Adrian Newey, the last airbender, the man with 26 championships to his name over the course of his storied career. That's the one who's saying that the Max Verstappen is built different, that he's the one that, notwithstanding all of the other chaos, mention no names, Brazil 2024, that when he puts on his helmet, he's different, ladies and gentlemen. And the joke is, here's my prediction, you can take this one to the bank. You'll see it over the course of the next 4 races, that the pressure, by dint of his god-tier level performances, upper echelon each and every single time, his metronomic consistency, the 10,000 hours that he's got in as far as his practice levels, his ability to deliver, extract out of himself the best in the moments where it matters most. When you're playing against that type of competitor, when you're driving against him, it is different. That's where the mistakes come from. That's why McLaren all of a sudden have forgotten how to do efficient consistent pit stops. That's why Lando Norris will make a cheeky mistake in qualifying. Props to him over the course of the Mexican Grand Prix weekend. It was not that. But don't tell me that you're not going to see errors of the unforced variety from both Lando and Oscar over the ensuing 4 races, because when Max is in the room, when he has entered the chat, everything feels and looks a little bit different, a bit inevitable. On the same podcast, there was another chap talking to the legend that is James Allen, and he said there is something not just inevitable about Max, but impossible. The delta in the championship now sits at 30-something points. Max would have to move at a rate of 9 points on average per race now. And as implausible as that seems, sometimes in Formula One chat, anything can happen. And it usually does. If you were going to back against anybody, I would advise, lest you be an abbot of unreason who wants to lose their money, that there are safer places than to bet against the one that they call Max Verstappen. What are we doing here?